This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, a leading international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Julie Flower, and in this new series, I'm delighted to explore innovative ways in which coaching is being used for social good. Each week, we'll take a detailed look at a different scheme, seeking to make meaningful impact in a specific field of lived experience. We aim to inspire you with powerful coach and client perspectives, speaking directly to those involved, and to challenge all of our assumptions about what coaching is and who it's for. Welcome to today's episode of Coaching for Good. This time we're heading to the southwest of England to look at a scheme which uses coaching in all sorts of different ways to support young people, many of whom have experience within the care system. I'd like to welcome Duncan Cherrett and Ana Collier from Young Devon, which is a charity which works to change the odds in favour of young people across the southwest. Welcome to you both. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining. I'll just hand over to you both to introduce yourselves. Hi, Duncan.
Hi. Okay, so I've now worked for Young Devon for coming up to 22 years. I originally was a teacher and very much had a passion for youth work alongside. And I think the more I was in that education system, I recognised that there were groups of young people for whom it just wasn't fitting, it wasn't working. And I think that helped lead me to the transition out of that traditional education route into youth work and really looking at changing the nature of the conversation, changing the nature of the environment for those young people and seeing if we could get a different outcome. And that's 22 years later, I'm still doing it. So there we go.
Wonderful. Thanks, Duncan. Welcome. And hi, Ana.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. So I'm Ana. I've been with Young Devon since 2017. I'm very similar to Duncan. I was working in education before and found that it just isn't really hitting the mark for some of those young people that we can support. So that, coupled with my own experience of school, led me into youth work. And here we are, working together to change the odds.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome also, Ana. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think there's something around the way in which we challenge assumptions about how coaching can be used and who coaching can benefit. And that's really what we're looking at within this series. And I know that you are using coaching philosophies and coaching approaches in lots of different ways in your work. So I wonder if you could give us a flavour of some of the ways in which you're using coaching to support young people.
You go first, Ana. There you go.
Thank you. So we run multiple projects within Young Devon. What Duncan and I can probably focus on today is around our mentoring projects and our education provision. So young people that we're supporting have been disaffected for many reasons. So they've got a lot happening at home. They may have been within the care system, like you said earlier. Perhaps school didn't work out for them. They've got various sort of mental health or physical health difficulties. And all of these things combined means that they just need a slightly different approach. And we take coaching and mentoring to really put them at the heart of their journey and what's going to happen next for them. Would you agree, Duncan?
I think from our side of things, the focus being really around that disengagement from education. We had a number of projects and the difficult thing to try to keep track on is that quite often our projects would run for 3 years and then end, and then another one would run and then another one would end. But the theme running through that whole of it was about how do we build the rapport, develop the relationship, developing a trusting professional relationship with that young person so that we can help guide some of them in the decisions they make or understanding how they tackle the things that life's throwing at them. And quite often, again, when that spinning chaos of the world and education is in there as well, education takes a back seat because everything else going on is far more important. So very much looking at how do we develop some of their coping mechanisms, some of their own actions in life that means that they can still focus on some of those things that are really key around that education side of things. So we might have had some working with them when they were still within that school age of under 16, where we work alongside the school. They would do some individual we call mentoring, coaching with a youth worker to try and get a situation where they were more likely to improve their attendance and improve their engagement within that school environment. Our other stuff is quite a lot of the time is post 16. So actually they've left what would be the mainstream school set up, and actually they're quite lost and they've fallen through the gaps and they don't really know what they want to do. So again, we would use a range of referral providers to link them up with our mentors, to then take them on a kind of a journey of really trying to dig down and look at what are all the things that are getting in your way in life, and actually what skills can we give you, so that means that we can let you go out into the world and be able to cope with it. Because it doesn't work if we're there as their crutch, so to speak, and they never are able to let us go. So that's always a real fine balancing act that we try to manage.
It is a balancing act, because fundamentally I think one of the first things that we need to do is build trust and encourage young people that there are people in the world that they can trust, that are there in a professional capacity, but then that can lead to some dependency. And it's again a balance, because they may have experienced services before that are sort of more centrally run, but they might only be a 6-week project and we're offering something slightly longer. So they'd never know when that's going to end. They say, oh, well, I've tried this before and it didn't work because they just helped me out a little bit and then they couldn't work with me anymore. And you're almost going back to basics, aren't you? And starting again with relationships and trust and safe spaces, and encouraging them to open up to you and allow you in.
Yeah, from everything you've said, as you say, the relationship and building that trust and rapport and actually taking that time, investing in that relationship is clearly key for working with these young people. You've mentioned that you call it mentoring, but actually a lot of what you've described, the coping mechanisms, that very person-centered approach and empowering people sounds like coaching. And I'm just wondering, what is it about coaching approaches or philosophy do you feel really works well with young people?
The philosophy of it. I think the element of empowering those young people to try out and find and develop the skills for themselves. Because I think, again, if you try to tell them what to do, then quite often, even as adults, you go, well, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how I should act. So how do we guide them to discover it for themselves, feel that sense of achievement, feel that sense of confidence that they can do it? It doesn't always have to come from somebody else telling them. And yeah, I think, like I say, it is a bit of guiding, but it's also a sounding board, I think, for them sometimes to be able to come up with ideas, and then you try and talk through, okay, let's have a look at what happens if we do that, and then this kind of scenario and kind of game theory, in a sense, of going, okay, we could do that, but what happens if we're 3 or 4, 5 steps down the line? What about another route? What about another thing? And let's have a look at that concept. Yeah, it's difficult because you might have what is a right answer because of a previous experience, which might not necessarily be the right answer for that young person, but you want them to try and find an answer for themselves. And that takes time. And I think Anna said that historically, some of these projects would go, you've got 6 weeks, you've got 8 weeks, you've got 12 weeks. And while that's important in a funding point of view, because if you have a never-ending intervention, then quite often the danger is that there's a logjam of those 7 or 10 young people who never come off caseload. But if you have this approach of going, 12 weeks and you're all better, then actually sometimes you could, depending on that young person, just broken the surface of going, we've made a breakthrough and now we're going to see a change. So I think if we get a chance to talk about it, the Empowering Enterprise project was probably our most successful and free type of project, where the freedom to be able to select the timeline, which was really important, and I think allowed far more success than you normally would get with some of those fixed term mentoring programs.
I think we take a really aspirational approach as well, where it's a very positive interaction for young people, and we believe in them. We believe that there's a lot more that they can achieve and aspire to. So I think that element of coaching comes into play a lot with just being aspirational and believing in people.
Yeah, being there, believing in that they can fulfill their potential and actually supporting them to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
A lot of positive reinforcement, yeah. Some incredible kind of stories from Empowering Enterprise. So Empowering Enterprise was effectively European Social Fund via the big lottery, via Government Office Southwest. So lots of pathways that usually hoops to jump through and paperwork. But at the heart of it was working with those young people, 18 to 24, furthest from the labour market. And how do we support them? Because there was a big recognition, and there still is really, that there are a core group of young people in that age group who are supposed to go along to Job Centre Plus every week, and the coaches are overwhelmed where they've got 20 minutes to work with them and send them off, and you've got to make 30 applications. That young person has just got so much going on in their life. It's the last thing they can even contemplate. So this was a really innovative project that allowed you to work with those young people that had been identified by the Job Centre Plus as needed far more intervention. And actually through our work and through that help and guidance to try and overcome all of the other issues in their life, to then a position where they could feel confident to apply, gain and sustain employment, really fed back in as well. Because if you can make that circle connect, then that young person is an active member of society for years to come, rather than being seen as that unemployed, not contributing mindset, which also damages their own self-worth. So it all tied in. And I think because we weren't tied by a fixed time limit, it gave us and the mentors the ability to give that young person time to grow. We still had to give them a point to move on at some point, but it could have been 6 months, it could have been 3 months. The odd one was kind of 9 months. It really was. But to see the success at the end, it was still worth it.
It sounds hugely impactful. And in coaching, we talk about coaching the whole person, don't we? Whereas actually sometimes, as you've described, maybe people see things very much about a particular problem or challenge or particular part of someone's life, whereas actually having that flexibility to actually understand the whole person can then reap huge rewards. How was your experience of that scheme, Anna?
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, like Duncan said, we were really lucky to be a part of it, and we were lucky to get an extension at the end as well.
7 years, and in fact, it went for, which is unheard of, really.
Yeah.
I think COVID played a part. It was about to end right before COVID happened and the lockdown. And I think there was a recognition that actually all of the work that had been done had just been undone
very quickly
through lockdown. And then actually they extended it to really get back to work for another 3 years after that.
Which presented its own challenges as well, because suddenly that was a completely different way of working. There were young people that we did still meet in person, but there were some young people that had to be coached and mentored via video call or phone call. And suddenly the world was a very different place for the young people. And we weren't quite sure what was going to happen at the end either. So we were really adapting to different things every day. But I think we worked with hundreds of young people over that 7 years, and sometimes you see them today and they're in a completely different place.
Just trying to think of one of the ones that Bob did. I'm trying to think what one stands out. The one where he was doing the renovation work on the boat was always one that I think, maybe because of the photos.
Oh yeah, that was lovely. We would get referrals from the job centre, like Duncan said, but also from other places. Some of these young people wouldn't be in a place where they were engaging even with the job centre. And this young person in particular had really struggled at school, had a lot of things going on. He had been in care. And one of our mentors found an opportunity at a local boatyard to renovate an old ship. And he went and he did it for an hour. And he said, "That's what I want to do. Thank you so much." And we managed to get him there fairly regularly. He applied for an apprenticeship there. And yeah, the transformation over the 6 months of those weekly meetings in person, really putting him at the centre of everything, was just incredible.
Oh, just even listening to that story. And I think those personal stories are the most, I don't know, the word inspiring is overused, but they are.
Yeah.
And just demonstrate that transformation. So it must be hugely satisfying to be involved in that kind of work. I'm just wondering, how do you evaluate the impact of some of your work?
So we use a tool called a distance travel tool quite a lot with young people, where they'll fill it out as a questionnaire with about 20 questions, and those questions will be around sort of social development, education, employment, sort of soft skills like independent living, and they'll fill that out in the beginning of the support. We'll revisit it after 3 months, and often you find that the score goes down because perhaps they're able to be more honest now. They've realised perhaps they weren't. Some of the bravado has gone away, and then we'd do that regularly every 3 months with them. And also we do a lot of case studies. We use a lot of peer evaluation tools. So it's constantly evaluating, because I think when you're doing the work, sometimes it's hard to see those small gains. So revisiting all of that different evaluation and seeing the impact that you've had at the end is really worth it for the mentors and coaches as well, to see what an incredible job they've done.
Yeah. Within that longer term Empowering Enterprise one, we did soft outcomes, distance travelled at the start, wasn't it? Where is your confidence? How confident do you feel doing this, doing that? Leadership and teamwork and some of those things. And then midpoint and then end point and reflection. We translate that to our post-16 education courses. So part of what we run within Young Devon is for those young people that we will do and deliver mentoring and one-to-one mentoring to, quite often, again, if they're not in that education environment and it's a 16 to 25 age group, we would look at trying to signpost them into our post-16 education programs where we deliver small-scale education in a youth work setting with a youth work ethos with a far more wraparound pastoral care to try and overcome all the other barriers. But again, within their 12-week programs, they'll do impact monitoring in terms of soft skill evaluation, their own personal evaluation at the start, reflection on the start in like about week 2, then a week 4, week 8 and week 12, then helps chart where they might view and feel that they've grown and feel more confident about, or changes in their reflection about where they're at. And within our housing projects, we've quite often used Outcome Star, which quite a lot of people are familiar with. And that's the thing that's within Young Devon, because we have various areas around like housing, early help for mental health, counselling, skills, education, youth work, various projects. Quite often with the funder comes a different way of wanting to do the measuring. So we don't have just one for the whole organisation, which does make it tricky for our data monitoring team to try and drag all that information sometimes. But like I say, getting that young person to reflect on where they thought they were at the start and look back, and then tie that again with some quantitative case study reflections again with the young people. And some of the most powerful ones are when the young people give their statements, quotes, or parents may do about just the difference, the change in how they feel, their personality, or where they're at in their life.
We did do some YouTube videos, didn't we? Some little interviews with young people and their mentors for those who were feeling very brave. And that was really lovely to hear their story in their own words. But we didn't get many who wanted to do that.
They love it. They're happy for it to be written down, but don't make them say it. Yeah.
Yeah, saying it out loud in front of a camera is quite different, isn't it? Quite different. But as you say, such powerful stories of personal transformation. And this series is all about coaching for good. And what strikes me is just that kind of ripple effect then, that if you've had this impact, this intervention, then what the ripple effect is throughout someone's life and throughout perhaps the whole system in which they operate.
Yeah.
You've described the way in which you collect data, that you evaluate. As a charity trustee myself, it's incredible how the way in which we look at outcomes has come on in the last 10, 15 years, incredibly. But I know it's still really hard to demonstrate to funders that we're worth it, even if you're doing great work. So I wondered if you could reflect on the funding landscape and how you navigate that.
Cool. Yes.
Big question.
Yeah. Given, like I say, from the 22 years of remembering the world pre-financial crisis, and when there was schemes and money for quite a variety and a real cutting out all the different bits there, I think the recognition was the value of preventative strategies was really understood by government and funders in a way that I think has been lost in the sense. And I get it, because you've gone, what are the essentials? And it's very easy for you to go, oh, well, there's not a problem there, so we take that funding away, without recognizing that the reason why is because of the work that prevented that thing appearing in the first place. And that's what we always find really difficult, isn't it? How do we evidence the thing that hasn't happened because of the work that we've done?
Yeah.
And that makes preventative work really difficult sometimes to get the funding purses opened over the top of some other things where we've got immediate issues. I understand it. It's not the way I would like it, but you try and roll with it. So I think the best case we can do is ensure that we've got quality, robust monitoring and data that we can draw out of it. We've got real impact case studies and statements from young people who can really witness firsthand the difference and the change that's been made. And something that we look to do as well is some of the projects we've been lucky enough to have external evaluators, which makes our job really a lot easier, because then we've got somebody else coming around gathering that and pulling it together. But being able to evidence the cost benefit by actually that young person making the transition into being a member of society, engaged, employed, successfully contributing, then actually being able to put a kind of a monetary value in the terms of what that saves the taxpayer longer term. That, I think, is where charities sometimes struggle, and the more help that can be done to do that. Particularly, I think the small charities, I think your large-scale nationals, fine, because they've got the ability to buy in a team in a way that calculates that. But I think sometimes when we're on these smaller charitable that are still making a real valuable difference in the community on the ground, that it is difficult to find the time, the ability, the knowledge base within those smaller charities to be able to pull that information together.
Yeah, as you say, making that business case that if you invest now, you save much further down the line. Society saves.
Yeah. We have seen some improvements. I think there's always a big focus on hard targets, like how many people have you gotten into work, how many people have gone back to education. But there does seem to be more of a focus on the softer targets, like how is this person feeling after the intervention and what improvements have been made to their daily life. So I think that's a really positive thing. And also around communities, we did a lot of work with sort of community cohesion on the Empowering Enterprise project, where young people are often thought of as trouble, and working within communities to change that did have a lot of impact. And we did some community projects. We got young people out supporting other older people in the community, and it did change people's perspectives, I think.
Thank you. We've spoken quite a lot about the clients, about the young people. I'm just wondering about the coaches, the mentors, the youth workers, your colleagues, because there'll be a number of obviously coaching practitioners listening to this episode. So I'm just wondering, what are some of the things that you've taken into account in your training and in your ongoing supervision and support as you've brought in more of a coaching approach to your work?
I think from the point of interview, we're looking for people who can be nurturing, can be aspirational and positive, but also have a really healthy understanding of boundaries. In terms of lived experience, that is useful as long as the coaches and mentors are at the end of their journey of view, because the young people are coming to us with a lot of complex needs, and it can be
trauma as well sometimes.
There's so much, and it can be really heavy. So we need our team to be quite robust. However, we provide a lot of support and a lot of training, really regular supervisions and appraisals, and the whole of the management team is always on call should anybody need us.
Yeah, I think that is one of the real within Young Devon, that we do a lot to try and provide training for staff. So whether that is our early helpful mental health training that we did, whether that was trauma-informed practice, whether that was bringing in a team from the kind of what were the educational welfare officers around relational practice and understanding how the brain works and how it reacts to different scenarios and actions. The normal magic training, which is fantastic. Bringing in those other specialists that can help enrich a mentor or coach's understanding of a young person, but also sometimes it's an understanding of yourself. Because I think to understand yourself puts you in a much better position to be able to work out how to support and coach a young person. When it comes to interviews, core values of Young Devon around our behaviours and attitudes and professional conduct, and it's kindness and collaborative, and actually, like you said, relationship is at the core of it and the key of it. So actually that coach's ability to form an approachable and nurturing relationship with a young person, but holding those professional boundaries. So you can only know so much sometimes at interview, but those are the things that we aspire to try and draw out of people. We also really like people that have come from various industries as well. Quite a lot of our mentors have not necessarily been youth workers or key workers in the youth or the voluntary community sector before, but actually have made some of the most inspiring, because I think sometimes what they've brought with them is a life experience from somewhere else, because actually these young people aren't all going to end up being youth workers. They're going to be working in retail, manufacturing, computers, all sorts of things. So actually bring in an experience that they can draw upon to help support those young people. And that's part of what Ana did a really good job of within Empowering Enterprise and within our mentoring, where we were working directly with the virtual schools, which are the kind of social services care experience team around post-16 education, matching the mentor with the young person and looking at how that, when the referral comes in, understanding and getting a good feel for that and see who's going to work. And I think the matching process is really key.
Thank you. So many questions I'd like to ask, but I'm going to ask you both to reflect, really, thinking about the way in which you incorporate coaching approaches into your work at Young Devon. What's been your own biggest learning from doing that?
I think some of my staff might not appreciate this, but I would say that probably the way that we coach young people is exactly the same way that we coach our team and our staff and the people around us, because the way that you need people to respond for that positive outcome is fundamentally the same. So although you might phrase it slightly differently, I don't think the approach itself is any different.
Thank you. And Duncan?
Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think without saying the same thing that you've said in a certain sense, but trying to think of something really insightful and different, but I can't at the moment. When I reflect on it, you might have to come back to me on that one.
I think it's something that We really value it, don't we? We know, and I think sometimes it's really difficult to describe what it is, because for us, it's part of our ethos, it's part of our values, and it embodies everything we do day to day. So sometimes it's really hard to pick that apart, but we believe in it.
Yeah, the one thing that springs to mind that I guess I reflect on for myself in terms of managing the teams and the contracts would be, I think, is more of my own reflection and learning that possibly didn't at the start fully appreciate the robustness that we needed in the mentors sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
I think that would be one that if this is reflecting on, God, what I wish I knew more at the start than I know now, because somebody will come with all of the energy and saying, I'm going to make a difference and all these things, and not being fully aware of actually their own traumas that could resurface as a result of who they've been, and the young people and the things that got brought up they're working with. So I think if I was going to, that's me reflecting on a better understanding of the impact that sometimes it was going to have on the coaches and how to manage that and how to understand and look for robustness right at the start in interview and how to tease that out in a sense and identify where it is, because it's difficult because you've got a lot of people that really want to make a difference, but actually, like Anna said, if they haven't gone on the full journey themselves with their own trauma, that actually it could end up being more damaging for the young person and for them.
Yeah, and that's really, I suppose there will be people listening who are interested in using their coaching for greater social good. But that's a fascinating point of reflection, isn't it? What are we bringing? What else might we have that's unresolved? And as coaches, we need to know ourselves, don't we, before perhaps go on to support others. What advice might you give to coaches who are experienced coaches, maybe, for instance, been working a lot within corporate organisations, but are interested in using their coaching in a different way? What advice might you give them? Where should they start? What might they do?
I think there's always opportunities to visit charities and learn more about services, perhaps do some shadowing if it's appropriate. I think that's a good place to start, because then you get a feel of whether that's for you without having to fully commit. I think everybody comes to us with good intentions and wanting to help, and that's wonderful. But sometimes it can feel scary to adjust the age group that you're working with. If you're used to working with people who have been employed for a long time, and then you're moving into that more sort of teenager, the youth sector, that can be a bit daunting for people. But I would definitely just suggest to get in touch with somebody local and see if you can come and just explore.
I'd say look at who's out there locally in terms of local youth charities. I'd say do your research in inquiring about what training is there and provided. If there's an opportunity to do some shadowing, that would always be really useful. One of the ways in sometimes, and it would really depend on the organisation, but for instance, within our post-16 education programmes, we have mock interviews. So that's always a really good way where we might then get somebody from a different industry who would be part of the mock interview process, who then go, oh, actually, I really enjoyed that. I'd like to do a bit more. And then sometimes they might come in and run a workshop or give a little talk about how they got into the job they got into. So sometimes it's about dipping your toe into the world of teenagers in a different environment. And then I think, even to the extent, sometimes I think there's a real benefit from volunteering at, say, local youth clubs. There's not as many youth clubs around these days, but there are still those where open access, universal provision is there. Within some of those slightly older age groups, that can be a route to where, again, what you want to do is use it the same with young people, is try before you buy, isn't it? Because what I would say to them is don't lose heart if it takes longer than you think it would to get your volunteer application done and your references back and your DBS is done, because those sort of things, frustratingly, because there's a lot of things that need to be checked off, can take time. And I know that those can be sometimes somebody goes, oh, I've got my passion for it, and it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks later and they still haven't started. So don't lose heart on that. So I think if there's an opportunity to do some shadowing, try before you buy, just go in and experience alongside that environment, then I think that might help give you a better kind of going, yeah, do you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to see it. Local CVSs should have kind of volunteer opportunities. I think local CVSs should also be able to provide lists of charities in an area. But again, Google is your friend in this instance.
Yeah.
in terms of,
Yes. And CVS, for anyone who might not know, is Council for Voluntary Services.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Lots of opportunity, as you both said, to just test the water, go and I think not be afraid to say, I'm going to, as you say, observe, just dip my toe in, and it may or may not be for me. But yeah, that's very helpful advice. And there's so much, I think what we're discovering with this series, if we just scratch the surface and we just ask the questions, there's so much going on, probably all of our local areas, and just having the opportunity to think about how as coaches we can perhaps use our skills more widely.
I'm just thinking then as well, adding in kind of terms of thinking back to some of our mentors that have come in, I think if they could identify mentoring that is in line with some of their experience, for instance, around employability, first and foremost, because I think what we found sometimes is we had a couple of times where mentors would come in and around that, but actually then if it came into some quite traumatic things, it was a little bit, well, I wasn't ready for this yet. So I think, again, identifying the nature of the coaching and mentoring that is required. I wouldn't go straight into dealing with those young people for whom like lots of trauma going on and lots of chaos, I think.
That was a big part of the matching process, wasn't it? And we were lucky with the Devon-wide service that we were quite busy. So we had multiple mentors in different areas. So we could work quite collaboratively if one person had a different set of skills to another.
But that also comes down to the charity or the organisation working with to make sure that they've got those parameters in place as well to manage and support.
And actually, you've mentioned as a charity that you are multi-skilled. And obviously you're used to supporting people who have experienced trauma, who may have mental health difficulties. How do you manage some of those safeguarding and ethical boundaries, if you like? Is this coaching and mentoring or is this therapy? And what are some of your considerations in the moment and for the service?
Yeah, so that would always be reviewed. We were talking about regular supervisions and training and caseload managements, and we offer team reflection opportunities as well. Because we're a multidisciplinary charity, if it does feel like it's edging over into actually we need to get some counselling support for this young person to bring your time back to what you're really good at, then we would refer internally or externally if we needed to. But the collaboration around that is really key.
And exactly that point where we just talked about robustness, but also skilling the mentor and coach to have the ability to express to that young person going, look, these are the parameters of where our work is, and this is what our focus is. We'll look at that, but we'll signpost that to a specialist. But that takes some strength and character sometimes, because you can end up wanting to solve everything for them. And so again, that comes from some really good, strong line management and case management support from Ana with this one, but whoever the line manager would be around helping to support them in how you structure a conversation like that to ensure that young person doesn't feel abandoned. But again, it does come down with that conversation with the line manager and case review. And we found it really beneficial, didn't we? Where we had a once a week, even though it was teams, once a week drop in for all the mentors to come together and just chat. And therefore, they're almost like peer support about going, yeah, crikey, yeah, we could do that. And being able to then stay on track, isn't it? Sometimes, isn't it? Because you can end up, particularly young person or young people, can drag you off down a route because of the chaos that's enveloping their lives. Yeah. So that's being able to stay on track and stay focused. And that's really useful at the start, setting the scene with the young person, setting the understanding about what we're here to do, having their case notes that are done each week, and setting some short, medium and long-term goals as well, which really helps keep the focus on what they're aiming to achieve.
I think also having really good local knowledge. We built like a support directory for Devon that the mentors could use, because like we talked at the beginning about young people being able to trust professionals, we don't want them to become the only professional they can trust. So exploring with signposting and referrals into other agencies that are more specialist in certain areas or would fit their needs better for certain things was really important. We transitioned through that with them so that they weren't going in there cold, having to meet a whole new person and starting again. So we do a lot of advocacy in that area.
Yeah, thank you. And it can be so difficult, can't it, within any given area for anyone to navigate or comprehend all of the different agencies and other organisations that might be able to help. So having that local knowledge and that support. Wow, a fascinating area of discussion around those boundaries and the benefits of having a multidisciplinary approach. As we start to draw things to a close, I would be interested briefly in hearing from you. What's been your biggest challenge in introducing some of this coaching work to the organisation, and how have you overcome it?
We didn't introduce mentoring to the charity. It had many different versions and iterations through Young Devon's life in various forms.
I suppose it's developed a lot over the years, hasn't it? And our approach to it, with all our experience and learnings and constant evaluation, has allowed it to develop and grow.
Yeah, possibly wider than Young Devon. I'll take it back to a previous mentoring project. So I think this must have been 2012. There was a peer mentor network, which was, again, piece of work that was spun out of a partnership of organisations that met on a regular basis across Devon. There was a team within Devon County that was really focused on education and employment. And this was a small pot of money that was established and linked up with Plymouth City Council and to provide mentoring for young people who were unemployed. And that had a fixed term to it. But what it was born out of a desire from a number of organisations and the local authority recognising that there were a core group of young people not in education, employment and training who were harder to get back into education because of all the other things going on. So that helped develop from all of our organisations and various other charities experience of mentoring through volunteering, through the old Millennium Volunteers or the Involved team, or mentoring, which was a risk and behaviour project around more about those under 16 that were disengaged from school. And we had mentors once upon a time, small amounts to do with that, more around behaviour aspects. Draw all those bits of learning together to create this peer mentor network and develop that as a process and a philosophy around more intensive, regular intervention with individuals where they could focus on all those barriers that were preventing them getting into employment. And I thought what was also quite unique about what we included in that funding was that when they came to the end of, I think it was like 48 hours was the basis of engagement.
Yeah.
And you could do that 1 hour a week for 48 weeks, or you could do it 2 hours a week every other week, or you could do it 4 hours. So there was flexibility there. And actually when they gained employment, you had a further 26 hours of in-work support that they could draw upon, because quite often we were seeing that if you got them into employment and then you were like, all right, okay, see you later. They were like, well, no, I still need your help. So having that opportunity, it meant it was on the young person's term to say, actually, I'm okay now. I've got a job, I'm happy. But then you already knew that they could call upon them. And I think the freedom of that and giving them the permission to say it's okay to call and we can stay in touch really drew some learning from that. And I think that fed into then what we wrote as the bid alongside the partnership and the consortium, which were many of the same players from the PM Personal Mentor Network that went into the consortium that was successful in getting the Empowering Enterprise bid from the European Social Fund as a roll-on from that. So I think maybe the introduction wider is more about all of the draw and all the experiences that we had within Young Devon and bringing that to the table of a partnership and a consortium that would be able to be successful in the other bids. And I think that then has fed particularly mine and Anna's conversations with any other authority or organisation where they've gone, actually, we've got this group of people and we want to achieve this outcome, and looking at then how we can use one-to-one mentoring in that aspect.
Thank you. Very powerful to be able to have that foresight to work in partnership and bring those. We know partnership work is not easy, but actually when it works, it can be transformational. Anna, any challenges that you would reflect on?
I think that, as we've mentioned earlier, I think funding and longevity of funding has to be our biggest challenge. I think since I've worked at Young Devon, there have been points where it's felt quite uncertain and we're 24 hours away from one project ending and suddenly, it's okay, we've got the bid and it's through and we can keep going. So I think that is the biggest challenge. But I think for Duncan and I, we know what outcome we want and we're constantly looking for opportunities to be able to deliver that. And it's been really good.
Thank you. I would like to ask then, what's next? Notwithstanding the uncertainty of the environment, but given there is clearly a need for the work that you do, what's next in your coaching-informed work with young people?
At the moment, we've got a big focus on our post-16 education that Duncan's touched on, with growing that across the county. And whilst we haven't got any one-to-one projects at the moment, we're really focusing on this small group coaching so that we can develop peer support and coaching within groups of 12 to 14 young people. So that's our focus at the minute, but we're always on to the next thing, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it's a period of All the funding for any of our one-to-one stuff has come to an end in that aspect. Their Empowering Enterprise ended, and there hasn't really been anything new to come out yet. The mentoring with our care experienced young people, the money has become tighter and therefore it's not a focus anymore. So I think for us, we've got the model and we've got the experience. So we're there waiting to see what other things come up. Within Young Devon wider, coaching is still happening and mentoring still happening in some other aspects. So we have a project called InReach, which is within kind of NHS hospitals, which is a similar ethos around relationship building, around coaching and mentoring and supporting those young people, but in a different guise or topic area, in the sense that these are young people who are persistently in and out of hospital, and actually with some intervention and some mentoring and coaching alongside, can they reduce the need for them to continue to go back into hospital and use and effectively create that bottleneck, and actually how can we support them to come out and stay out of hospital. So that's been really successful, and we just won an award for that, didn't they? Went up to London.
Yeah, they did.
So different team to myself and Anna, but I think that's where within Young Devon, when we have our senior leadership and our operational managers meetings, we draw together our different projects and case studies and experiences. And then because Andy, our business development manager, who writes and oversees the bids, because he works on all these different ones, he knows he can take that learning from different ones, and then he might come to us and go, oh, that thing you did around mentoring, we've got another thing over here going on. Can we talk to you about how that model worked and how that linked and how it can then be adapted to another situation, another scenario? And our post-16 education alternative small group learning has massively exploded in terms of numbers. And so at the moment, we're trying to cope with that waiting list because it's a different route of funding. There isn't the ability to do it in one-to-one quite the same way. But what we do have is we have youth workers and lead tutors who deliver the education package, but also wraparound support. And so there's still an element of coaching those young people into the decisions they make, but in a little bit more of a group environment, given the nature of how that sort of funding works. Previously, we may well have had some one-to-one mentoring that kind of sat here, and then the journey would have been into the group. At the moment, we've just got the group. So we'll see what reinvention of what will comes along next.
Yes.
And we'll apply for it.
Goodness, it sounds like we could probably talk for a couple of days about these things. As an ex-health commissioner, certainly that hospital scheme sounds so intriguing. And as you say, the group coaching, the peer coaching, which can actually be a hugely powerful model with those slightly older young people. Again, fascinating. So maybe, who knows, if we do a second series.
So pass you over to Pete. And
we do a second series of Coaching for Good, I'll know people. Yeah. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you both, Anna and Duncan, about some of the very impactful and powerful work that you're doing to support young people within Devon and the wider Southwest. So thank you for sharing that with us and giving a glimpse of some of the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for having us.
Thank you. It's quite nice to take our own step back and a breather and reflect and talk about it ourselves. So actually, that's been really uplifting for us to talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.